Hello, listeners. Beyond the Mask, in conjunction with NBCRNA, is pleased to announce that listening to our podcast can earn you Class B credits. For more information on how to submit them, go to our website.
Beyond the Mask is made possible by the team at CRNA Financial Planning. With almost 2 decades of experience, the firm guides CRNAs through the complexities of investing and financial planning. Schedule a free consultation today by calling 855-304-3748 or go online to crnafinancialplanning.com. Now, on with the show. Welcome to Beyond the Mask, Innovation and Opportunities for CRNAs with Jeremy Stanley and Sharon Pierce. We know you spend your day caring for your patient's best interests. On our show, we want to care for you. Join us as we leave the operating room and learn the latest in the CRNA industry. Beyond the Mask starts in 10, 9, 8, 7...
Welcome to Beyond the Mask. I'm Jeremy Stanley, and I've been working with CRNAs for over 23 years, and I'm married to one. And my co-host is...
Sharon Pierce.
Sharon's a practicing CRNA for over 20 years, a past president of the AANA, the NCANA, and she's held many other leadership roles. As usual, our goal with every episode is to educate and enlighten CRNAs, and I think our topic today is definitely going to do that. And Sharon, what time is it?
It's time to wake up, Jeremy.
I think it is. Well, Sharon, welcome back to the studio.
You know I love being in the studio.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to today's show. It's the first time we've done one of these in a while.
I know. I drove 2 hours from Garner to get up here to be with you.
Look at you.
I just want to know, would you do the same for me?
Probably not.
I didn't think so.
I mean, I'm honest about it, you know. So.
If I hadn't had Botox, you'd see my eyebrows be going up now, right?
Well, you know, I'm excited today. We got another one of our historical series podcasts, and of course, our 2 favorite guests, Sandy Ouellette and Nancy Bruton-Maree. Welcome, Sandy. Welcome, Nancy.
Good to be here.
Good to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have you.
Great information. Always great information.
Oh, yeah. Amazing resource to have you two, and we're glad well, how long did you have to drive to get here, Nancy?
2 hours.
2 hours. Well,
5 minutes.
Yeah, me and you were good, weren't we, Sandy?
So
not
Nancy,
our fault they moved so far away, is it?
Nancy and I are the real deal.
That's right.
Yeah, but this historical series is just one of my favorite things anyway.
Yeah, and we're getting a lot of traction on this.
I know.
think
Tell
people
about
are really
what happened to you
enjoying
this
that.
morning.
Yeah, I was telling Sharon earlier, you know, that I was actually doing a presentation for a school, and they said that they were listening to the historical series, some of the financial ones, and some of the political ones. They're having
and
their
of course
students
the
do that.
historical.
Yeah, well, yeah, I said that
Did you
first.
say that?
Yeah.
Okay. I was
But,
too busy thinking about the school, and I think we should shout it out.
Oh, no. I think I'll leave it.
I can shout it out. Go Duke.
All right. Okay. We'll throw it out
We know
there.
that Wake already does it. Listens to all of our podcasts, too.
That's true. And I think there's probably a lot more out there we just don't know about.
There's a lot. There's a lot of them.
But Sharon, who are we going to be talking about today in this series?
We're going to be talking about Gertrude Fife, which may be a name that a lot of people are not familiar with. But, you know, it's always important, the people behind the scenes. Just like behind every man, there's a good, don't look at me like you're stupid, woman.
Oh. Well, you know, I was just thinking as you were talking, the Fife part's got me going. All I can think about is, Barney.
Oh, my God.
Barney
She
Fife,
was not Barney Fife.
She was not Barney Fife. But, being so close to Mount Airy,
That's true.
and, that's the first thing you think of when you hear Fife, or at least I do. I don't know.
That's true.
So it is kind of funny. I'm going to digress for just a minute. So my little 7-year-old, her grandmother loves to watch, Andy and Barney, and I Love Lucy. And so she's going. My 7-year-old is now on to the black and white I Love Lucy.
Oh,
so she's like, can we get it on our TV, Dad? And she did this. She dropped her wedding ring in the barbecue, and she took apart the barbecue, and the one I'm talking about. And I was like, oh yeah, I remember watching that one. And it's so funny. But she'll say, that Andy, he's so funny, and Opie, and I'm thinking, what other 7-year-old's going to know this stuff?
That's true.
And the only way she knows it is because she watches it with her grandmother.
That's a great story.
And that's the same thing about this stuff, right, guys?
Yeah.
Because these students aren't getting this today.
That's right.
And the only way they're going to get it is from YouTube. Not YouTube. YouTube.
That's right.
Although you guys could be on YouTube because
Are you trying to say we're old?
No, not at all. No,
Not and
I
live.
think you're both young.
Not and live
You're
and
sitting
get out
beside
of the
me. You
room.
know I would never say that, Nancy. All right, so we're talking about Gertrude Fife, who we'll kick it off with maybe the early part of her life and where she was born and so forth. And Nancy, we'll let you take the reins.
Well, Gertrude Fife was born in Vermont in 1902, and she received her nursing training at Fanny Allen Hospital School of Nursing in Winooski, Vermont. I've never heard of that school of nursing.
How would you like to have said I went to Fanny Allen School?
And Nancy, to your credit, I would have said Winooski.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ski.
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 You know, ski.
It's Polish.
Yeah.
Wonder if it's still around.
Probably
But
not.
anyway,
Worth
she
a
was a
Google.
1925 graduate of Lakeside Hospital School of Anesthesia in Cleveland, Ohio. And she was appointed a member of the staff at Cleveland Hospital following graduation. And she eventually became first assistant to Agatha Hodgins, who was the program administrator there.
Wow. Okay. So obviously her and Agatha knew each other.
She was a student, of Agatha.
Yeah.
was she?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Okay. Did I miss
Interesting.
that? Or-
and then became her first assistant.
Okay.
Later on,
Yep,
What,
she did.
what does that mean? What does first assistant mean? Like,
assistant director.
okay.
Yeah.
So that just some different
Mm-hmm.
terminology. Okay. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt.
So, but, she did contribute a lot to clinical anesthesia, I understand, as well.
Yeah, when you look at the anesthesia of the day, now we're talking about the late 1920s, early 1930s. So what did they have to work with? Well, they had oxygen, of course. We all have oxygen, and that's a good thing. and nitrous oxide, and they had ether, and they had cyclopropane and some of the other explosive anesthetics. So most of the anesthesia was given by open drop with spontaneous respiration. Well, the surgeons were getting more interested in doing more complex thoracic procedures, cardiac procedures, and so they had to begin to think about, well, what about this mechanical control of ventilation? And so it was really at the Cleveland Clinic, through the work of Claude Beck, Maltese, and Gertrude Fife Hospital in Cleveland, that they really began to work and originated a mechanical control of respiration. Now, it would be short-sighted not to say that others were also working on that. For example, Helen Lamb, along with surgeon Everett Graham, pioneered anesthesia machines and also paved the way for thoracic procedures. So you had one person trying to think about this positive pressure control of respirations, and another one working on machines that could help that. And then there was Olive Berger, along with surgeon Blaylock at Johns Hopkins, that was doing procedures for palliative cardiac shunts and repair of tetralogy of flow. And a little bit later, but not too long, and we'll talk about Olive Berger and Betty Lank, who was at Boston Children's Hospital. And Betty was the one that later showed that cyclopropane was the ideal anesthetic to anesthetize patients for tetralogy of Fallot. So they were all doing things that came together and sort of contributed to the advancement of surgery, really. If it had not been for the ability to provide a different type of anesthesia, they would never have been able to do these intrathoracic and cardiac procedures. Now, I think so much, why cyclopropane? Why was that so good for TETs? Well, when you think about it, when they have TET spells, it's because they desaturate. Their systemic vascular resistance falls, and so they increase their right to left shunting. But if you've got something like ketamine, or you've got something like cyclopropane that sort of supports the hemodynamics and increases systemic vascular resistance, it decreases that right to left shunting. And I don't know if they knew that at the time, but that had to be one of the reasons that this became so popular.
Now, you guys both gave cyclo.
Yes, I did.
Sandy did.
I did.
Didn't you at least
We
give
had
it
to.
once?
Well, when I came along, we ended up having to use cyclopropane because we still were required to do 5 true closed systems.
Okay.
And the only thing that the time that we had to do those closed systems was cyclopropane. And so I used it for my 5 closed systems. But again, going back to what Sandy said about cyclopropane, I did one teenage boy, and I can't remember now what he was involved in, but he was involved with some type of drug that was not a good drug. And we had to maintain his blood pressure. See, one thing that cyclopropane did was instead of lowering your blood pressure, it raised it. And so we used cyclopropane on him. And also, when we were rotating to Wilkesboro, we used it in OB.
Yeah, that's where I used it mostly in obstetrics, and it was said to be the best drug for patients in shock, just because of what Nancy said. It supported blood, but much like we would think ketamine would do.
Yeah, it kept your heart rate up and your blood pressure up.
Okay.
It kept both of them up.
I had a cousin who's 2 years younger than me, and he died when he was 20 months old. But I don't know what kind of heart problem he had, but my mother used to talk about him squatting all the time, so I'm sure he probably had tetralogy, and the only thing they could do was to enlarge his VSD. And so they had gone in to do that, and he died right after his surgery.
Yeah.
But you also have to remember it was explosive. But it did stay down toward the floor. And
That's why all our plugs are up high.
Yeah. But I also told the students, that the reason everything's up on top of your gas machine isn't because that was the way it was planned to be. But when we first started everybody having a monitor and they were little, they had to put it on a pole 5 feet up from our gas machine. So everybody began to see how great it was to have all this stuff on top of your gas machine.
Right.
So that's how all that came about.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, that's also the reason why the doors to operating rooms close the opposite way of what code is. Like all doors, you've got to be able to push them out, so in case there's a fire. But they made the doors opposite in operating rooms, and they're still like that today. So if there was an explosion, it only killed the people in the room.
Oh, yeah. That's pretty nice of them, isn't it?
That was real nice.
That's
the reason why.
They had
there's
conductive floors, too.
Yeah, so that's the reason why there are a lot of things in operating rooms that don't serve any purpose, but it was all because of anesthesia and its flammability back in the old days.
So anyway, in addition to clinical anesthesia, Gertrude Fife was a charter member of the NANA, which later became in 1939 AANA, or AANA, and she was appointed director of the University Hospital of Cleveland, which was formerly Lakeside Hospital School of Anesthesia in 1934 after retirement of Agatha Hodgins. Agatha retired because of a pretty serious medical condition that we've talked about before. She had a real massive myocardial infarction and was pretty much compromised after that. But anyway, Gertrude Fife served in that position at the school and as director of the University Hospital's department until her own retirement in 1946. So she was a teacher, she was an excellent clinician, and she was on the cutting edge of where anesthesia was going in the mid-20s to mid-1930s.
Well, Nancy, why don't you tell us about her involvement with NANA? I know I've heard you say many times you're glad they changed the name to AANA because you didn't want to be a member of NANA.
That is so true.
You don't mind being a NANA. You just don't want to be a member.
I don't want to belong to NANA. But she was one of the 40 nurse anesthetists that attended the organizational meeting, which Agatha Hodgins was very prominent in putting that together. And there were 12 states represented there. And it was Gertrude Fife who moved to form a national association and to call it the National Association of Nurse Anesthetists. And it was seconded by another older, or one of the
charter
first
members
kind of nurse anesthetists, which was Ada Alwyn.
I've never heard that name.
No, we don't hear too much about her, really, other than that one moment in time.
Everybody gets one moment.
And one other thing that happened there, although it didn't happen, it never did happen, was there was a decision made to seek affiliation with the AANA, or the American Nursing Association.
Have we done a podcast on that and how that?
It was with Agatha we talked about.
We talked about it. That one's worth a podcast in and of itself.
But we never did do that. But following adoption of the National Association of Nurse Anesthetists, Gertrude Fife, along with Vera Rice and again Ada Alwyn, were appointed to draft a tentative constitution and tentative bylaws. And it was drafted and adopted that same day.
Can you imagine bylaws
and
for an organization?
Jesus, I can remember us going to 10 and
all
11
later.
o'clock at night over just a couple of bylaws at the meeting, for God's sake.
That's just because people wouldn't be quiet, Sharon.
So on March 12th, 1932, Ms. Fife and others signed the Article of Incorporation of the National Association of Nurse Anesthetists, and she was a listed member of the original corporation. So she was a charter member of NANA.
Have we still got, you've probably seen the original document. I would assume it's in the archives.
I would imagine it is at the office, yes.
Oh, that'd be so cool.
Yeah. I mean, we've got the founding document with signatures of IFNA, and that's in the archives. And so I'm sure that they have that.
Ah,
That'd be cool.
that would be so cool. All right, I'm sorry.
So in 1933, Gertrude Fife, who again was first assistant to Miss Hodgins at the University Hospital, assumed the administrative role of NANA. So it wasn't too long after the founding, it was founded really around 1931 or so, that Miss Hodgins stepped down due to health issues. And there was a monumental change that happened at that time, which probably has withstood the test of time. With this change, the notion of state registration and state supremacy, which was supported by Agatha Hodgins, disappeared, as did the push to strengthen the states at the expense of the national organization. Gertrude Fife believed in a national organization and a national supremacy, so to speak, over the states. And so that was sort of settled at that point. And so some early objectives under her leadership was to have a strong education and a sound organization. She solidified a plan to hold the first annual convention with the convention of the American Hospital Association in Milwaukee in 1933. At that time, think about this, paid membership in NANA was 362 members, as opposed to 42,000 active members today and probably 50 or 55 members, but very small. And one person that really helped sort of support and help this organization grow was John Mannix. He was assistant director of University Hospital Cleveland, and he was the one that wrote the original letter to the American Hospital Association about having the two groups meet together for that meeting. And so some of the concerns were arranging a program, building up the membership so there would be a credible showing of nurse anesthetists at the Milwaukee meeting, and getting the Constitution and bylaws revised. Now, I can't find it in writing, but somehow I think when John Maddox, I get the feeling, saw those bylaws and Constitution that was drafted in a day, there was probably some deficits in his mind. And so he became very involved. And so the other thing was they wanted to launch the association's educational programs. The focus was really on education. And I thought it was very, very interesting that a letter written to the president of the American Hospital Association by Mannix requesting affiliation stated, and I'll read it, "Inasmuch as this group plays an important role in the present-day hospitalization, I believe it would be well if arrangements could be made whereby their meetings could regularly be held while the American Hospital Association meetings are in session." Of note, that continued from 1933 until 1974. When Goldie Brigham was president in 1974, the members, with board direction, voted to no longer meet every time with the American Hospital Association because the members wanted to go to other places besides Chicago.
Now, do you both of you guys would have went to some of those meetings, wouldn't you? Y'all are not.
Not really,
not
because I
that
graduated in 69.
Okay.
And I guess I did go to some early meetings in 70, 71. I do remember they were in Chicago.
Right.
But
They were all in Chicago?
Yeah, they were all, because that's where the American Hospital Association is. And so I guess in the early days when I went, it was that combined group. But that changed in 1974. Now, what was really interesting to me is the letter that was received from Bert Caldwell in 1933 in answer to Can We Meet Together? And he said the American Hospital Association would particularly welcome an arrangement of this kind and believes that it would have many mutual benefits which members of your association and ours could enjoy. You are, of course, aware that a very large percentage of the hospitals are employing nurse anesthetists. This in spite of a very insistent movement to confine the administration to anesthetics to at least the Department of Anesthesia in every hospital under the control of the Doctor of Medicine. We are in no means in sympathy with this last mentioned movement, and I'm sure when the hospitals would come to a very much better understanding as to the problem of nurse anesthetists if the two meetings could be held concurrently in the same city. So he recognized, even at that time, that there was a little rift in terms of what is anesthesia. Is it a practice of nursing? Is it a practice of medicine? And, of course, the physician anesthetists were saying it's a practice of medicine.
Hey, Sandy, I was just thinking that, here we are in 1933. If you think of the time period and you have these women, powerful, smart women, I just wonder what those anesthesiologists, physicians who were probably mainly male, how all that fit together in this time period. Can you imagine? I mean, I know the personality of CRNAs today, and a lot of these ladies had very strong personalities.
Yeah. And in that time, though, there were very few physician specialists in anesthesia.
Okay.
So I don't know exactly when I read this, but there was a time where the ratio of CRNAs to anesthesiologists was like 17 to 1.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And there were very few. And
that was before World War II, I believe.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah. But the other thing is, of the objectives of this new organization, there was one objective that eventually changed, and I think it's important to pay attention to that. Their sixth objective was to secure enactment of laws to protect the profession's right of the association and its members. That was the sixth objective. And after some discussion, now listen to what it changed to. It didn't change really. It just became less self-serving. So what it changed to is to promulgate the educational program with objectives of disseminating through proper channels the importance of proper administration of anesthetics, to take proper steps to protect the public as well as to protect the professional rights of the association and its members. So they put the public in front of the rights of the members.
All right, let me contextually, you've got me thinking now, Jeremy. So we met with the American Hospital Association from 1933 to 1974, but yet we have talked about this before. It was 1937 when the anesthesiologists come out and said that their goal was to get rid of us.
Right. And that was apparently going on right now, according to Bert Caldwell's letter, who was the head of the American Hospital Association. He knew, even at that time, that there was fractions in the country that really believed it was a physician's duty, it was a role of medicine to administer anesthesia.
Well, the American Hospital Association clearly has been in our corner, and, whenever the first opt-out started, when you go back and look at them, they were all generated through the American Hospital Association, usually, every single one of them, because I asked Mitch Tobin back many years ago, where did that impetus come from? And it was always the Hospital Association.
It was very interesting in terms of direct reimbursement. The American Hospital Association never signed on one way or the other. However, with the payment schedule, they became involved.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that would make sense.
50% of their nurse, 50% of the nurse anesthetists were employed by hospitals.
Right.
Yeah.
They were very interested in this payment parity.
Absolutely. It comes down to that dollar, right?
Always.
All right. So, Nancy, what meeting did Miss Fife assume the presidency of NANA?
She assumed the presidency at the first convention that was held in Milwaukee, which Sandy's mentioned. Actually, she was the second president because Agatha Hodgins is considered to be the first president. She was served actually 2 years, from 1933 to 1935, because she was reelected the following year. One of the things that she stated at this first meeting was the formation of the organization was for the purpose of elevating the standards of anesthesia. So when you look at this, education, again, was in the forefront of these early pioneers of the National Association. So, and at the first meeting, accreditation of programs and a national board examination for nurse anesthetists were really the prime topics that were talked about. And there was a divide, as Sandy said, between state registration, which Agatha Hodgins wanted, versus national registration, which Gertrude Fife wanted. So all of that was being discussed. So again, at the advice of John Mannix, AANA bylaws were modeled after those of the American Hospital Association and the Ohio Hospital Association, because evidently they had some really good bylaws, and had a really good model.
At least in John Maddox's eyes.
Yes.
And I'm sure they were, actually.
So, an initial concern was who should be a member of the Nurse Anesthesia Association, and also what was the criteria for membership. And, you look at that and you think, well, why in the world would that be such a big deal? But as you look at other things that became obvious at that meeting, the problem was that at that time that no two schools of nurse anesthesia were alike. No one had ever defined what a qualified nurse anesthetist was. There were some schools who taught some classroom. There were schools that was all OJT. It was just all taught in the clinical area. Watch me do one, then I'll help you do one, and then you go to work, So an unwritten objective of the association, and you'll love this, was to, quote, separate the sheep from the goats in the field of nurse anesthesia.
So which is better?
Yeah, the sheep or the goat?
Well, I got news for you. Goats don't smell too good, okay?
Okay, well, you know what goat means in today's culture.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Greatest of all time.
Yeah.
So if somebody calls you a goat today, because somebody called me that, I'm like, what the heck? It means greatest of all time. So we better clarify
this
for
time-
our
I'm sure they
listeners.
didn't call
You
a
were not
donkey.
the greatest of all times if you were a goat, okay?
Okay, so goat
Okay.
smell, we got it. So the sheep are good.
Now, Gertrude Fife was a real proponent, as was Helen Lamb and other people who attended this meeting, about talking about accreditation of nurse anesthesia programs. This was really a productive meeting. I mean, when you go back and read about this meeting and you look at, this is 1933.
Right.
Yeah.
And so...
Right after the Depression. I mean,
and you were just starting to get over the Depression, or trying to get over the Depression. But, they
It was even
talked
almost
about,
during it, really.
yeah.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
You talked about education programs. You talked about accrediting these programs, national examination, developing standards, standardizing the programs. They also talked about that they should visit all the programs and decide if they should be accredited or not accredited. And the accredited programs were supposed to be on a list with NANA, so people would know who they were. Which instructors were good were to be put on a list and held there with NANA. And also the unaccredited programs. And the unaccredited programs were supposed to be told why they were not accredited. So there was just a whole lot of really meaty stuff that went on at this meeting. And so, like I say, a lot of this happened, but much of it didn't take place, though, for several decades. And the reason was World War II came into being, and the United States, of course, got into it in 1941. And so a lot of this had to be put on the back burner. But still, it wasn't forgotten. And these ladies were just really in the forefront of things.
Now, let me go back to something because I'm still having a hard time wrapping my brain around the state versus federal. And Fife was for federal, Agatha was for state. What does that really mean?
Well, Hodgins wanted nurse anesthesia categorized at each state level. And she wanted nurse anesthesia to be in a separate category between medicine, the Board of Medicine, and the Board of Nursing. Mm-hmm. Okay? Now, what Fife wanted was she initially wanted, and this did happen in this order, a national examination.
Okay.
Because she felt that the national examination, the thing that would have to follow that, would be the schools would have to get together and present the same education,
yep,
or they wouldn't be able to pass this exam.
Okay.
And so, but it would have taken a lot of money and a lot of legislation to get a separate category for nurse anesthesia at the state level. And also, if that had happened, and I'm getting ahead of myself in our little script here, but if that had happened, the case with
Dagmar Nelson,
the Dagmar Nelson case would have been lost.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
I think the thing that was really determined at that point, we are licensed as registered nurses,
right,
at the state level.
Uh-huh.
But they were pushing for certification and accreditation schools. We would eventually be certified for our specialty
Right.
in nurse anesthesia. And it was because we were nurses that we were allowed to administer anesthesia as a due function of nursing
Right.
in the Dagmar Nelson case.
Okay.
And Nancy's right. That's exactly how that was won.
Okay.
Gotcha.
And you can imagine, oh, thank God for Gertrude Fife. Can you imagine if we had to fight with this, if it had been a state
Every
registration in all of our states
Oh, yeah.
and all of the legislatures and, oh, my God.
It would have been all different. All the exams would have been different. Could
Yeah.
have been different at the state
So
level.
basically, what happened is you had the merging of education and practice, and you had to come up with a model
Right.
that
Right.
encompassed both of those
Right.
things. Because now our practice is truly state by state. Our practice is, but
And licensure as an RN.
exactly, in which, Jeremy, I don't know if you know this, but North Carolina had the first registered nurse in the country.
I did not know
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Huh.
And
Was
she,
first board of nursing.
Yep,
Wow.
first board of nursing.
Was that in 1903?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
It was?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought it was.
And
Very
she,
early.
the nurse that lobbied for that, didn't even have the right to vote
Wow.
and lobbied for registration.
What was
so
her
that
name? Was it Welch?
Jesus, you
Jimmy?
would think I'd
I
remember.
don't know.
But yeah, that would be a good podcast too. It's really kind of cool. Here she couldn't even vote, but yet thought that nurses need to be registered so that not everybody could be called a nurse. You
Wow.
actually had to be educated.
Wow.
Pretty cool, huh?
That is
Yeah.
cool.
Yep.
Yeah.
But let me say one more thing before you turn this back over to Sandy. But the outcome, one of the outcomes of this meeting was that Gertrude Fife sent out a questionnaire to all of the existing programs to find out what they were teaching, what was their curriculum. So, again, these ladies just really were on the ball with all of this. And eventually, pretty much, and the first education committee was established at this meeting too, with Helen Lamb as its chair. So, you can see that these ladies, eventually everything that they talked about at this meeting happened. So they were really futurist if you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because some
Given
of
the
this-
time
Forward
period.
thinking.
Because some of it, the exam didn't happen until 46, and then accreditation
45.
was 55?
45.
45, and then accreditation was in the 50s.
52.
Yep.
Yep.
Wow.
Okay, so Gertrude was really an organizer when you think about it. Now, just think for a minute. In January 1933, there were 100 members of the National Association, and they had in their treasurer $492.25. By September 33, there was 503 signed up. with a treasurer of over 2,000. So they had increased their finances $1,574 in 9 months under her leadership. And although the first meeting was held during the Depression in Milwaukee, 120 members attended that meeting.
Wow. All right, let's do some math here. All right, Jeremy, wake up.
What are you trying to figure out?
Well, just think about it. If 120 members showed up and there were only 503 members, you're talking about 20% of the membership showed up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, think about our annual meetings now are, 3,500 people, and we have 50,000 members. I mean, just
About
doing
3%,
yeah,
3 or 4%.
exactly.
And by the way, we're not in the middle of a depression yet.
Exactly.
That is true.
So,
But it does show you who's doing the work, though,
Yeah.
well, but I mean, 20%. I mean, every state meeting, every national meeting, if we got 20% of our membership.
Yeah, but you also think this is new and there are
I
very few
understand.
members. Yeah.
I know, but it's still pretty cool.
And they weren't making the kind of money they are now, and they weren't quite as spoiled as we are now, and so.
And it only costs $5 to be a member.
Yeah, well, there you have it. Well, you got to look at what they made too, because you're talking about what our membership. How much our membership, you probably know this, Jeremy, how much our dues are relative to how much we make. Do the math, $645, and the average salary is $185,000.
0.3%.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So one of the things that they organized at that meeting was membership categories. And they divided it from active membership to associate membership and honorary membership. So to be an active member, you had to have graduated from an accredited school of nursing. Remember, there was no accredited schools of anesthesia then, so it was nursing. And passed the required state board examination, so you were licensed then as a nurse. And you then had to be actively involved in anesthesia for not less than 3 years during that particular time, and must be so engaged at the time of making application. So there really wasn't that many requirements for the nurse anesthetist at that point, but that was active membership. Now, associate membership goes without saying, any person not qualified for active membership. But it didn't have to be a nurse. It could be people that was just interested in the aims of the association and its development in hospitals, special clinics, or medical institutions. Any of those people could be then associate members of the organization. Now, today, we think of associate members being students.
Right.
But certainly no hospital administrators or physicians or anybody, just because you have an interest in anesthesia, you can't be a member of the AANA. And then there was honorary membership. And one of the things that would be good for these people is they would be exempt from payment of annual dues, which Nancy said was about $5 a year. But, during the Depression,
That was
Right, that was a lot of money.
yeah, and it was during the meeting Agatha Hodgins was made the first honorary member, and at the same time the honorary president. The motion which carried stated, realizing that Miss Hodgins had been a great incentive to us all, and as this is a culmination of her life's work, aim, and interest in us, I recommend that by unanimous raisings of voice, we elect Miss Hodgins to the honorary presidency of the National Association of Nurse Anesthetists. And the motion was carried. So she became that. Now today, honorary members are people pretty much are non-CRNAs for the most part, aren't they?
Yes.
There's probably less than 10 listed as honorary members today.
One of your husband.
Yeah, my late husband, Chow Marie's one.
He was the third person, right?
Also, yeah, I think
Rita is one.
Right,
Rita
yeah.
Rupp.
And John Maddox, I think, that we talk about here, that used to be at Cleveland Clinic. When I was on the board, I wasn't president then, but I was on the board, he received, I think, honorary membership during that time. So,
hey Sandy, let me, I just want to interject real quick for you here. So you said $5 was the annual dues. What do you think that's equivalent to, just based on what inflation has been between 1933 and today, what should the dues be?
Oh, this is going to be good. I know you figured it up.
I have no idea.
Just a guess. Sharon, what do you think?
$1,000.
Okay. Sandy, take a swag.
Oh, I'd say about $800.
Okay. Nancy, what do you think?
$1,500.
$1,912.
Oh, snap. So that would be what the
That's what the
membership...
dues should be,
Oh,
based on $5 in
my God.
1933.
See, I was
and
the
the
one
inflation
to one.
rate.
Yeah.
You were. Yeah.
Well, we
Think
could
about
start.
that.
We could start a movement. Things are
Hey.
pretty quiet right now.
That's I tell you what.
Yeah.
$1,900.
$1,900.
CRNAs would...
But that's what the
Wow.
equivalent to $5
I get it.
was
I,
back then.
I
mean, you think about, that's what I was saying, in 1933.
That is a very good point, Jeremy.
Can you imagine?
Yeah,
We
'cause
could all give more. Couldn't
some
we?
people weren't even
absolutely we
making
could.
money.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
mean, some of them weren't
Yeah.
even making any money.
I mean, that's amazing to me.
That's
amazing.
That's a pretty cool point.
Well, I want that on the agenda for the next meeting. Yes.
now
then we get together. I don't want to do this virtually.
Oh,
Hey,
now won't that
please
be
don't
a
say that I
hot
said this
business
because
meeting?
I'm going to get a lot of hate mail.
There might be some rifles that are brought.
Oh my Lord! Now that'll be a contentious business meeting. Not that I would know anything about that.
Yeah.
All right,
Sorry, Nancy. I didn't mean to get you off track, but I thought that was interesting.
It is interesting.
all right. Continue, Nancy, before you were interrupted.
Well, we're still at the meeting in Milwaukee in
Okay.
1934. But the first meeting, they did establish some minimum standards for schools of anesthesia. And what was agreed upon was that the minimum length of the program would be 4 months. They would have to do a minimum of 250 cases and a minimum of 75 hours of classroom instruction. Now, they did not say what tuition was. So setting a standard of education for nurse anesthesia was, as I've said, everything about anesthesia was the keynote thing of this meeting. And there was a surgeon, which Sandy mentioned a while ago, Everett Graham, and he reminded the members, and I'll read this for you. In order to continue the excellent work which has been started, it is wise to have an organization such has been created in order to establish certain minimum standards of training and efficiency. It will be necessary for you leaders to safeguard your profession by recognizing the able and not recognizing the improperly trained nurse anesthetist. So he was encouraging them to separate the goats from the sheep too. So in Ms. Fife's address at the meeting, she stated that a committee should investigate schools and recommend accreditation or no accreditation, which is I've mentioned earlier. The association should also encourage establishment of, again, she was a big proponent of that national board examination for nurse anesthetists. And certification did finally begin in June of 1945. And oddly enough, she and Helen Lamb and another CRNA named Miriam Shoup helped develop that first exam that was given in 1945. And then accreditation began in 1952, and in 1955, the AANA was recognized by the U.S. Department of Health, Education, and Welfare as the accrediting agent for the School of Nurse Anesthesia.
One point to be made, certainly about certification, also accreditation, this was all internal. This was all a part of the membership organization, and it remained so until the mid-1970s when our councils were formed. But I think here, since we just talked about membership, it's good to talk about that certification exam was a qualifying exam. We used to call it a qualifying examination because it was a qualifying exam for membership. Again, the sheeps versus the goats here. And if you couldn't pass it, you're not going to be a member of this fine organization.
But you had to be a member of the organization if you passed the qualifying exam.
That's
So-
right. That's,
Well,
Yeah.
I took,
Had to
Sandy
be.
and I both took the qualifying exam, and we were mandatory membership. And then it was decided, it was found to not be legal, that you cannot mandate someone be a member of an organization. And that's when I think they changed the name from qualifying exam. And that when the qualifying
well, it
went away.
just changed when we developed the councils in 1975,
70s.
76, because research came out in 1978. So it was about 1975 that we had the council, the three councils really at that point. And but And there were many years that members didn't recognize that you could still be certified without being a member of the organization.
And that's the reason why a lot of employers pay dues, because you had to be a member of the association.
Sounds to me like that law was probably enacted because of unions at that time. If you think about it, I mean, logically.
Well, I never give that much thought, but that probably does make sense. So I'm sure there's many other things that Gertrude Fife had her fingers in. And so is there anything else that you guys want to talk about things that she did? Because I'm sure she was definitely not a one-trick pony.
No, she was definitely not a one-trick pony. Oh, by the way, I do know a one-trick pony, just so y'all know.
It's sitting to your left. It's named Jeremy Stanley.
Well, actually, it is a male who is involved in financing that is a one-trick pony that I know.
Interesting. Okay.
That's an off-the-air conversation.
I guess so.
Well, at the time that Gertrude was president of the National Association, she also was acting director of University Hospital School of Anesthesia. She obviously organized the association's headquarters at the University Hospital, and she was the editor of our first official publication, and it was published in 1933, and it contained information about the first convention. She also published the first issue of what was to become the American Association of Nurse Anesthetists Journal, and that also happened in 1933. And she served as the journal editor and chair of the publishing committee until 1944.
Oh, my goodness.
She also was secretary. Where did I write that?
Treasurer.
For 15 years.
Yeah.
Holy cow. Wait,
Wow.
now, was Gertrude married?
No.
No.
All of these women were
None
not
of them were
married.
yeah.
Except Helen Lamb.
That's right.
Several
We know that
times.
story.
Went for the
Some
money.
younger
And she did well.
Helen Lamb's my hero. I'm marrying for money next time.
But she also, at one point in time, was secretary, and it really was her secretarial help that helped her with the minutes, and she finally did get the hospital to pay the overtime that she was having to do those minutes for the National Association. So can you believe that the National Association didn't pay it, her hospital did.
Wow.
But there was something else. Oh, the other thing I wanted to tell you, too, since you mentioned Helen Lamb. Helen Lamb and her husband, Walter Powers, went to Cleveland and sat with Gertrude at her dining room table and developed the program for the meeting, for this first meeting that was held in 1933.
Kind of sounds like the IFNA meeting where y'all got trashed.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
All right. So she was very aware of the Dagmar Nelson case. It was in her the third year of the association's history and second year of her presidency. But her answer to these legal challenges, that was one of them. Another one was happening in Indiana at the time, was high standards in education and certification of individuals through a national board, followed by an accreditation program. So she thought education was the answer and quality providers. She also had to do some negotiating, and she really brought the American Hospital Association in with us when some of these challenges were being inflicted. And so she had them write a resolution that basically said, be it resolved in the judgment of the trustees of the American Hospital Association that any legislation which bars or tends to bar the use of properly trained anesthetists would be a mistake and a step backwards. So she really was forming this bond with the American Hospital Association, which was very good at the time. And they continued on, without getting into too much detail here, on their accreditation through the 30s. And as Nancy said, that wasn't really formalized until 1952. So it was after her retirement, actually. You know, she had already
sowed the seeds.
Yeah, she had retired, I think, in 46. Okay.
Wow.
Now, this goes back to the disagreement between Agatha Hodgins and Gertrude Fife. Again, you know, Gertrude wanted a national registration and Hodgins wanted a state. at this time in 1931, nurse anesthesia was beginning to come under fire, and the Attorney General of Indiana had rendered an opinion that the administration of anesthesia was the practice of medicine. Now, we know all about that in North Carolina. Okay.
Don't we
Hodgins was really unwavering on what she believed, and I would say that Gertrude was pretty unwavering about what she believed. But Gertrude wrote Hodgins a letter, and in that letter, she expressed her opinion again that they needed uniform education, and the best way to get there was in a national exam and through accrediting schools. And she also pointed out to Miss Hodgins that she had done some investigation, and it would cost $500 to get a bill introduced in a state legislation. So they didn't have 50 states, and I think it was 48. But that would be $500 times each state, and they would have to have lobbying, which would cost around $2,100.
Wow.
I should have been a lobbyist back then.
Really?
So it eventually moved forward the way that Gertrude wanted it to move forward.
She thought that the greatest protection of nurse anesthetists was found in existing laws.
That's right.
Covering the registration of nurses.
Yes.
And then from a nurse, you become a specialist nurse, a nurse anesthetist, from an accredited school, and then are ready to take the qualifying exam or certification exam.
Both of them were right. They just had different paths of getting there.
Yeah, but if I had to vote, I'd vote for Miss Fife.
Yeah, I do agree. I do agree. But, I mean, it'd be, in some respects, a national piece would be helpful. Now we wouldn't be fighting state to state, but that's what the compact is supposed to do. So we're getting there.
Yeah.
But they were both
another 100
visionaries.
years, we'll see how it looks.
That's right. That's right.
You might be here.
I doubt it.
But as Sandy said, Miss Fife held the position of treasurer. It was not a board position until much later. She held it for 15 years, and then everything moved to Chicago. Okay. And also, I mentioned earlier, too, that she and Helen Lamb and Miriam Shoup helped develop the first qualifying exam, which was given to 92 candidates in 1945. And at the 13th annual meeting, which was in 1946, Miss Fife was made a second honorary member of the association.
And, that's interesting because if you look when we used to have the program books at every annual meeting and they list honorary members, they don't list Agatha Hodgins or Gertrude Fife as an honorary member. It's all these people that came after that were not
you
nurses.
know what? You're exactly right.
And so,
well, I think the beauty of it, of them being honorary members at that time, was they didn't have to pay dues, right?
Yeah, they didn't have to pay dues.
And I don't know when it changed. Once you've been president, you don't pay dues after you're president. And I don't know when that changed. I know you pay dues when you are president.
Pay a lot of dues.
I think that was about the time of the mid-2000s.
I think it was with Brian Chippus and all of them when
Brian
they did that study.
Brian Thorson. Yeah, around in there.
Mm-hmm.
Not quite sure which year, but it was
in there. Yeah, you're right about that. But Sandy, wasn't there another type of membership that came along that you could pay so much money, and there was another membership, and you could pay so much money, and you didn't have to pay dues after that?
Wait, you have it now, emeritus. Once you retire as a CRNA, if you've been a member for at least 25 years of the AANA, you pay a one-time fee, and you still retain all your rights. And we still have that.
I'm an emeritus member now.
Yeah, but you're different because you've been president.
Yeah, but
you didn't pay dues anyway.
Yeah, but the organization that pays our dues for us would pay less for an emeritus member than they would pay for a full-time member.
Yeah.
So I'm cheaper than you are, Sharon.
Well, that's good to know.
You got to live a long time to get that emeritus.
Well, actually, think about it. I've been an AANA member since, gosh.
Do you want to say this?
No.
Do you really want to say this?
Well, if you count while you're
1992.
Yeah, if you count while you're an associate member, I've been a member 30 years. Yeah. Almost, 1990 I started school, so I've been a member for coming up on 31 years. So if I retired given anesthesia, I could be emeritus member. Quit looking at me like that.
I'm just surprised you said that on air.
It doesn't matter. They know. My Facebook page has got my birth year on it.
A couple of miscellaneous points is that Gertrude was a recipient of the AANA's Award of Appreciation in 1950. And she received the Agatha Hodgins Award for Outstanding Accomplishments in 1978. So that was maybe 3 or 4 years after they started the Agatha Hodgins Award, with Ruth Satterfield becoming the first recipient of that. And then Miss Fife died on October 6, 1980. So 2 years after she received the Agatha Hodgins Award is when she died.
Oh, wow.
So she lived then from 1902 until 1980.
Now, did either of you guys get to meet her?
I
or
did
ever
not
see her?
remember meeting her, but whether she was there in person to receive the Agatha Hodgins in 78, I would have been at that meeting then. But at that time, I was a young graduate in 69, and I didn't know all these people of great importance,
Yes.
that were at the meeting.
That was the first meeting I went to. It was in Detroit.
And I don't mean this anyway, and I know y'all have gotten mad at me about saying this, because even at our state meetings, I would walk by you guys sitting in the bar, and all these students are going by, and I'm like, they don't even know who they're walking by, that they're walking past you two, and they just think, oh, it's just two ladies sitting in a bar.
Two old ladies. Come on, Sharon. You want to say it.
Two old ladies sitting in a bar drinking, and they have no idea.
Yeah.
No idea. And I'd like to think that this podcast has given you a whole new group of fans.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, when you think about her life's work and the relevance of today, I talked to Patrick Downey right before I came about another issue. And Patrick, for the people that do not know, is sort of the glue or the cement that holds the Diamond Club together, which is a organization of people who have served as president of the American Association of Nurse Anesthetists. But he said, when we were talking about different people, he said, the person that never has received the credit she deserved was Gertrude Fife.
And he probably
And
knew
he was
her.
absolutely right in that, because she was sort of a shadow of Agatha Hodgins, who's known as the founder. But it was her educational push that strengthened this organization to the point that we now have, 125 accredited programs, and we have a national certification exam. And who would have ever thought that we would have recertification that started in 1978? But it was all built on this framework.
Wow. That's a visionary.
Yeah, that she had a vision unbelievable, and it has sustained us throughout our years. And we're very close to celebrating our 100th anniversary, 1931 to 2031, not far off.
Wow.
Something to endure, anything to endure that long.
Yeah, so it's 90 years.
That's pretty cool.
Wow.
Now, speaking of Patrick lives in Wisconsin, and he really doesn't travel right now. And so we are going to interview him via Zoom, and my son-in-law, who's a CRNA, lives 4 hours south of him. And so I talked to Patrick, and Grant is going to go up and help him with the Zoom and get him set up so that we can do that. And what we need to do is ask him questions about all these people, because he would remember Gertrude.
Yes.
He would remember all of these people. We might have to break that podcast down into several sessions. But I told my son-in-law, I said, you have no idea what an incredible opportunity this is for you to sit in the same room with this man.
Yes.
It's amazing. So anyway, I digress. So you want to wrap this up, Jeremy?
Yeah. Nancy, Sandy, thank you as always.
You're certainly
Did
welcome.
a great job. You always put these things together, and we learn all kinds of interesting facts about these great leaders throughout the industry of nurse anesthesia. So, Sharon, I think it's a wrap.
I think so.
If you like our show and want to know more, check us out where?
everywhere you get your podcast: Stitcher, Apple, Spotify. See, look at you.
Look at that. You know all these. I like that. Yeah, but leave us a review.
Only if it's positive.
That's right. For Jeremy Stanley and
Sharon Pierce.
Until next time.
It's a wrap.
Today's show was made possible by the folks at CRNA Financial Planning, an independent consulting firm that offers financial planning services exclusively to CRNAs and their families. From planning for a child's future college expenses to building a predictable income stream in retirement, the firm is committed to offering you comprehensive financial services, customized to fit your unique needs and objectives. If you have questions about your financial future, get them answered. Call the team at 855-304-3748. That's 855-304-3748. Or go online to crnafinancialplanning.com. And thanks for your support of Beyond the Mask.
Hi, this is Jackie Rolls, President of the International Federation of Nurse Anesthetists and President and founder of Our Hearts, Your Hands, a global anesthesia support community that takes donations to allow nurse anesthetists in low and middle income countries to go to educational programs, to buy equipment or textbooks. Your donations are tax deductible, and we would appreciate your support.
OSA EMR is a free anesthesia EMR developed by CRNAs that you can download and use on an iPad. Our nonprofit mission is to make sure that solo and small practice CRNAs can digitally record their anesthetics. To learn more, visit osaemr.com to download and consider donating to our cause. Remember, for CRNAs, data is destiny.
Like what you're hearing? Be sure to subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and anywhere you like to listen to shows. Also be sure to check out BeyondTheMaskPodcast.com. Each episode is posted there with a corresponding blog post, and we timestamp important parts of the episode to help you quickly get to the content you're looking for. Also check out the special series section on the site. You can follow along and catch up on the CRNA History Series, episodes specifically about political conversations in the industry, or try the CRNA Personal Finance Series. It's all on BeyondTheMaskPodcast.com. And if you have a question for the show or want to be a guest, or even suggest a particular topic, fill out the contact form on the site or send an email directly to us at info@BeyondTheMaskPodcast.com. And lastly, let's take the conversation social. Check out our Beyond the Mask Podcast Facebook page and Facebook group.